Bitches be crazy. Apparently, although we're definitely not. I've just had a conversation with Giles Denning, and what I felt inspired to do after that conversation was just do a little solo episode on some of the topics that we discussed in that episode. One of the things that he does is around men's mental fitness, and he basically creates these spaces for men to go into and start that inner work journey. They might not fully really understand what it is or what they need, but what they do know is that something doesn't feel quite right, and for whatever reason their body or their mind is telling them, or their partner or their kids is telling them to go and do something about it. And what he's trying to do is facilitate the kind of environments where men can dip their toe in this and not just sit in a sharing pity circle around my wife does this, everything's woe is me, victim land, but to be able to talk about what they're going through and the experiences that they're having, but also be called up, not necessarily just called out on certain parts of their behaviour, although there will be that too, but they're being called up to raise themselves to a higher standard. And in that conversation with him, there was a couple of threads that I noticed around men and women are going through very, very similar things. And one of my biggest fears around the content that I see online and a lot of the conversations that I have had with women, particularly around the dating space, is that it's us against them, that we are fundamentally different, that our experiences are so much worse than the experiences of men. And I'm not going to dispute that the society and the system is not set up to allow for women to thrive. It's not. We all know that. That is not a new piece of information. I do not need to beat that dead horse. We get it. But what I will say is one of the things that continues to allow this to continue is denying the experience of the other. Denying the experience of men and trying to shut them down when they do create spaces like this, like a men's fitness space, where they can go and actually get the support that they need in the way that they need it, or that they start sharing what they need in the way that they need it, that they are immediately shut down and belittled and basically told to be quiet and go back into the kitchen in their form, that's not helping this. We are actively, as women collectively, actively participating in the continuation of the system that is set up to inherently suppress all of us and to not allow us all to thrive. And the reality is that system is set up by people, probably men, yes, but I also don't fucking know that for certain. None of us actually do. But it hurts men too. And I've seen this point be made by multiple other people online of like, the patriarchy hurts men too. It's not just hurting women. And if you are someone who wants to have peace in your relationship, wants to have peace in your home, wants to facilitate better communication, wants to live a life of integrity and purpose and spirituality, you cannot fundamentally be someone who wants those things and then acts in a way that doesn't allow them to happen. And if you are someone who is trying to do that for themselves, but they're not taking accountability for the 50% that you contribute to the relationship, then you are not living in integrity in the way that you say that you want to. And ultimately, anybody else's standards of what integrity look like is sort of irrelevant. You have to deal with your own compass of what that looks like and take accountability and responsibility for the part that you play. And I would say that to men too. And Giles and men like him who are facilitating the environments for this sort of work to happen are doing that. And I think what's really important is that we allow those conversations to happen, and for men and women to be allowing these conversations to happen and to be holding each other up, calling each other up, calling each other out, and then supporting them through the process of discovering how you have facilitated this thing, how you need to be more responsible for certain things. And what I would love for nothing more is to support a new wave of narrative online that allows both men and women to have their experience be shared, have it be heard, have someone else be curious about their experience, and then help support them in healing shit and allowing things to be peaceful and not projecting onto the other person, and actually hearing what your partner is saying and hearing what they need, and also learning how to communicate in a way that allows you to be heard. Because one of the hardest things sometimes, one of the things we spoke about was this idea that, you know, men and women will complain about different things within their relationships, but it takes a lot to be able to be curious about what that actually means under the surface. For example, my kids do this. I have 2 boys and they just leave their underwear wherever it's been taken off. It's just left regardless. And, you know, my partner sort of does the same thing, and women don't really do that. And it's a very strange thing that is. But, and one of the things that I will say is like, can you put it in the fucking washing basket and not just leave it wherever you've taken it off? And one of the things that I have had to learn is to communicate why that's important to me, because men and women fundamentally function differently and process the world in a different way. And that's okay, guys, by the way. It's okay. It's okay that we all process things differently. We all don't need to be processing things in the same fucking way. And what I've had to learn is to communicate the reasons why, and not in a way of like, I need you to do this. I will use a specific example recently, and I did this in the episode with Giles, is that when I work at my partners, we've all got this, we've all got the chair where the not dirty but not clean clothes live. And that chair at my partner's is where I need to work. And what I need in the morning is to wake up and to have a clear desk space so that I can just sit down and work. Because the way that I process the world and the way that most women process the world is that we see everything all at once, and we are constantly aware of all of the different things that need our attention. I need to not have that. I need to just sit down with my coffee, open my laptop, and get on with my work. And if there are things that need to be done in order for me to be able to do that, it causes friction, and that then has a knock-on effect for the rest of the day. So what it meant in that moment, my responsibility in that moment, was to be able to say, let me explain to you why this is important to me, and just tell him. And then he's like, all right. And then the clothes get moved. And you might have to remind them, a couple of times, because also bear in mind that you are coming into a space where somebody has lived by themselves. They have not had to do any of this. So if that is not something that they want to do or inherently have a drive for themselves to do, why the fuck are they going to do it? You wouldn't do it in your own space. So why are we expecting them to all of a sudden be able to do it? So that was one of the key things that we discussed. And a couple of the other things was bids for connection. This came up. And as I said in the episode, if you've not gone and looked at any of the Gottman Institute research, if this is something that is of interest to you, go, and they are like the gold standard of what, healthy relationships, healthy marriages look like. And this bid for connection thing comes up a lot. And what I would encourage you to do, whether you are single and dating and actively looking for somebody, or you are in a relationship and you are struggling with this, allow yourself, whether you are a man or a woman, allow yourself to be curious about what your partner's bids for connection are, because they are probably not the same as yours. And understanding what your partner's bids for connection are allows you to have them be met. And it will be a snowball effect. I can 100% guarantee that if you start, without even having to say anything, if you start actively looking for your partner's bids for connection and responding to them more frequently, not only will your relationship improve, because it fucking will, but your bids for connection will start to be met also. And if they don't, then back to my previous point, take responsibility for how you need to communicate that with your partner in a very clear way that's not projecting, that's not angry, that's not putting shame on them or blame on them, just being like expressing to them, you know, when you do this thing, I really love that you do it. And the reason that I love that you come and ask me to look at that bird outside is because it's a moment of connection for the two of us. And I really love it. I love it every time I hear you do it. It makes me feel really good because I know that in that moment I can show up for you and I can do something for you. But I've noticed that when I do the same thing and then insert your own bid for connection here, you don't do that for me. And I was just curious as to whether you knew that you were or weren't doing that, right? I'm curious to know. The way that you phrase the questions with your partner is so important. Not why don't you do it? Because that inherently gets the back up. There is so much undertone with why don't you, rather than I wonder why, or I'm curious to know if you know that you're doing that. And they'll probably be like, oh no, I didn't know. And then again, explain why it's important to you. And then reap the benefits, baby. And that leads on to the leaning in instead of leaning out. I historically was a disorganized attachment person, which basically means that I oscillate between anxious attachment and avoidant attachment. And I am not that person anymore. I still have tendencies, they still show up, and I am incredibly aware of them when they do show up, and I can actively do things in the moment to be able to not fucking do that anymore, which is a gift, but also it's because I've worked really hard. I've done a lot of fucking therapy, and I actively have to choose to continue doing it every single time it shows up, which is thankfully significantly less frequent than it's ever been. But that means that I would oscillate between needing closeness and desperate for closeness, and then desperate for space. And oscillating between those two things is quite a lot. And that still shows up in my relationships sometimes, but it's when I'm hormonal. It's when I'm tired. It's when I'm sad. It's all of these moments where I feel vulnerable. I feel exposed, and I am wanting to protect myself from being injured in any way. And it's just an old pattern. It's an old belief system that when I am vulnerable, if I ask to be taken care of, that need is not going to be met. In my relationship now, I fundamentally know that that's not true. That's not the case. But yet I still have to work to prove to myself, to prove to the old version of me that that is indeed not true anymore, and we don't need to continue doing it. So for example, leaning out versus leaning in, leaning out when you're tired and your partner is like irritating you because you're tired, going to bed without saying anything. And just like lying there with your back to the person and you know, huffing and puffing and sighing in bed and basically not expressing what's going on in your inner world, not expressing your need in that moment, versus saying, I'm really tired, I'm going to go to bed. And then going to bed and then giving them a kiss and telling them you love them, or saying I'm going to go to bed, like feel free to just like stay watching TV. You don't have to come with me. I'm just really tired. And being very loving in that moment and open in that moment with your partner, and making sure that they feel like it's not something that they've done, because you will know your partner better than anyone, but maybe they have a trigger around that. Maybe their ex-person did that to them, and it's going to set them off in a little bit of a spiral, and that disrupts the peace. Unnecessarily disrupts the peace, because it's not something that they've done. It is a need that you have that you don't feel comfortable or confident enough sharing and expressing, because you don't necessarily fully believe that your need is going to be met, that your need is going to be validated, and that you are going to be okay to just go to bed because you're tired. And that ties into the theme and the conversation with Giles, where around suppression. There's so much suppression on both sides in different forms, and it just expresses itself in completely different ways, depending on whether you are a man and depending on whether you are a woman. But we have both been suppressed. We are both learning how to renegotiate the contract of what a modern relationship looks like. And we are doing it without guides. We are doing it without examples of what a healthy version of renegotiating that contract looks like. So it feels like a lot because the weight of responsibility on us to be the ones who figure out the renegotiation of this contract, it's heavy. It's a lot. And a lot of what I see online in response to that is projection. Projection onto the person that we believe is responsible, which tends to be the other side, the other gender, just because we feel scared and we feel vulnerable and we don't understand. So we're frustrated and we're angry and we're tired of having to be the ones who are the ones who have to be responsible for figuring all of this out. Yeah, it sucks. But life is hard. And the reality of it is that I see and that I feel, and I so truly believe this, is that if we do not take the responsibility, if we do not make the hard choices now to do that work and to allow each other to renegotiate that contract, what are we giving our kids? I'm raising 2 boys, and the weight of responsibility around whether or not they're going to be in healthy relationships, whether or not they're going to be punished by society for just being, the most privileged demographic, in that they will be middle-class white boys, and what that means for them. I want to take part in hopefully trying to create an environment that isn't hostile to them in the way that I can currently see it. And one of the key solutions that I see to that is just learning how to communicate. Which seems like it's very simple on the surface, but number one, it takes a lot of practice and vulnerability and courage and bravery and all of those things. It's work. It's work to learn how to communicate with your partner, because they fundamentally function in a different way, for starters. So you sort of speak in a different language. So it does take a little bit to figure out what your partner's language is. And it is something that you need to be consenting to together. It's something that you need to be like, we're both working on this together, because it's really hard when one of you is doing it and the other one isn't, and you're not being met to the level that you are trying to meet the other person. And one of the key flips to this that I have found most helpful, there's a woman called Alison Armstrong. Go and check her out. She did an incredible episode with Chris Williamson on the Modern Wisdom, which is what introduced me to her in the first place. And then I went and read her book off the back of that called The Queen's Code. One of the flips that she talks about is changing it from what's wrong with them to what don't I understand about them yet. And the power of that is flipping from that there is something inherently wrong and inherently broken about this other person, which projects it onto them. It removes any sense of responsibility from you and makes it all their fault, versus what don't I know about them yet? What don't I understand about them yet? It allows you to take the responsibility and the power back in shifting the dynamic. And then off the back of that, one of the key ways in which you do that is the curiosity piece. It's changing the phrasing from why don't you to I wonder, I'm curious. And even just saying those words out loud repeatedly, it changes the way that you approach things. It changes the way that you actually think. It changes from the energetic state, changes from blame to curiosity. And if I was to say, do one thing, that is 2, but do one thing, is to change from blame and projection to curiosity and responsibility. If you focus on the way that you communicate as a starting point, that then fundamentally helps you shift the attention and understanding issues that are basically, that's what's going on underneath the surface. The way that you communicate, the way that you talk about it is a manifestation of what's going on underneath. So if your attention and your understanding of each other is broken, then that is going to present itself within your communication. If you start to change the way that you communicate, you will inherently, without really noticing it, you will change the attention and the understanding underneath, which is the fundamental foundation of a peaceful relationship. And in the conversation with Giles, and why it's so important that men and women are allowed to have these sort of open conversations with one another, is that it increases understanding. In me sitting with him and just realizing how much crossover there was between the two things, and that we both want peace. Women want to help create peace. Men want to help create peace. Fundamentally, we want peace. We both want peace. We just create it in different ways. We try and communicate it in different ways. And it's allowing the space to be able to understand, how are you trying to create peace in this relationship? Look for that. How are you reaching for those bids for connection? How do you lean in? And that will show you how your partner is trying to create peace in the relationship. And then also look at how you do that too. How do I bid for connection? How do I lean in? How am I trying to create peace in that relationship? And then work on how you communicate that with your partner. How am I currently communicating it? Is it working? Is it being received? If not, change it. And that in itself will just make everything more peaceful, everything more calm underneath. And it has the snowball effect. In the same way that the negative side does, the positive side does too. We have so much power to change the way that we do this.